When two guards tried to remove a black Marine from his son's graduation, no one expected 6 Navy SEALs to quietly rise from the crowd and stop the entire room without saying a word. Solomon Dryden didn't think anyone would recognize him when he arrived at Elmridge High. The school looked like any other small-town Texas high school. Old red brick walls, flags waving above the entrance, kids hanging out near the gym doors. The parking lot was already full of proud families, parents in dress shirts, siblings holding signs, and grandparents moving slowly with walkers. He parked his Dodge Charger near the fence and stepped out, adjusting the sharp lines of his dark blue Marine uniform. His boots shined like mirrors, not to impress anyone, but because Solomon never did anything halfway. His posture was straight, his expression calm, but behind it was the quiet strength of a man who had seen a lot in life. He had driven 8 hours from Temple just to see his son graduate. He could have taken a flight, but the Charger was his late wife's favorite car, and driving it made him feel close to her. Before heading in, he opened the glove box and pulled out an old photo, his wife holding their baby, Tyron. He slipped it into his jacket pocket and whispered, "I promised you, I wouldn't miss it." Each step toward the entrance felt heavy with meaning. Inside the gym, it was crowded and loud. The smell of popcorn mixed with floor wax, the sounds of chatter and shuffling chairs everywhere. Solomon handed his printed ticket to a volunteer at the door, a short man with a headset who pointed him to the 3rd row on the left. "Family seating," he said. "Appreciate it," Solomon replied as he walked in. Some people glanced at his uniform, some smiled, others looked away quickly. He was used to that. Being a tall black man in uniform always came with looks, some curious, some judging. He sat down, the chair a little wobbly but fine. The gym was decorated with silver banners reading Class of 2024. School officials stood near the stage, ready to start. Solomon's eyes searched the line of students until he found his son, Tyron, tall and lean, just like his mother. 18 years gone in a flash. He remembered holding him the day he was born, still in uniform, dirt on his hands from Okinawa. Now here they were. When the graduation music began, the crowd stood. Solomon stood too, shoulders back, arms at his sides. The anthem played, and while others placed hands over hearts, he stayed still. His whole presence was a salute. He thought of his wife and how proud she would have been. Then 2 security guards started walking toward him. Their black polos read Harlan Security Services. One was short and stocky, the other tall and thin, chewing gum. Solomon saw them coming, but didn't move. The short one leaned down and said quietly, "Sir, we're going to need you to come with us." Solomon turned his head. "Is there a problem?" The tall one said, "Yeah, this section's for families of graduating seniors." Solomon calmly took out his ticket. "This is my seat. Family seating, 3rd row, left side." The short guard didn't even look. "We got told it's full." "It was full when I sat down," Solomon said evenly. "Who told you that?" The tall one shifted, unsure. "Look, there's seats in the back. Let's not make this a big deal." "I drove 8 hours to see my son graduate," Solomon said. "I'll be sitting right here." People nearby began watching. Someone pulled out their phone to record. The short guard's voice hardened. "Sir, I'm asking one more time." "You can ask all day," Solomon interrupted calmly. "I'm not moving." The tall one sighed. "Maybe you'd be more comfortable in the back." And that was it. That quiet phrase that wasn't about comfort at all. Solomon knew what it really meant. He'd heard it all his life. He didn't reply. The air around them shifted. Everyone could feel it. The short guard pressed his radio, murmuring something into it, but Solomon stayed perfectly still. An older woman beside him leaned over and whispered, "Don't let them move you." He gave a small nod. He didn't want trouble. He just wanted to watch his son. But the guards weren't done. The tall one said, "If you've got a problem, take it up with the office. We've got orders." Solomon looked up at him. "You got a name, son?" "It's Officer Malley," he said. "Not officer," Solomon replied calmly. "You're private security." The short one stepped forward. "That's enough. If you don't stand up." He didn't finish. Because the gym doors opened, and 6 men walked in. No uniforms. No badges. Just quiet strength. They didn't move together, but anyone watching could tell. They were connected. The way they walked. The way they stood. The way they watched. Solomon didn't turn around. He didn't need to. He knew exactly who they were. The guards didn't. Not yet. But they were about to find out. Solomon Dryden had lived in places where power meant life or death, not in a school gym filled with folding chairs and a sound system. A student's name was called from the stage, and the crowd clapped, but people near Solomon weren't paying attention anymore. They were watching the quiet standoff. The taller guard, Mally, leaned closer and spoke softly. "I'm trying to do you a favor here, okay? This doesn't need to get ugly." Solomon looked at him. "You don't have that kind of favor to offer." Mally hesitated, but the shorter guard, Garvin, wasn't backing down. His hand hovered near his radio again. A few rows behind, a man stood up quietly. Nobody noticed at first. He crossed his arms and stared straight ahead. Then another man stood on the opposite side of the gym. Then a third. They didn't say anything, but they didn't have to. Solomon knew exactly who they were. He had led those men through mud, gunfire, and darkness years ago. Garvin leaned in again. "Listen, man, you're making this into a situation." Solomon turned his head slowly. "And you're not listening." Garvin's hand twitched toward the radio again, but before he could speak, a calm voice came from a few feet away. "Is there a reason this man's being bothered?" Everyone turned. The man speaking had a gray beard, a black coat, and a quiet strength in his voice. His name was Creed Marston, the same man Solomon had once pulled out of a wreck in Kandahar. Garvin looked up, surprised. "Who are you?" Creed stepped forward. "I asked you a question." Mally raised his hand. "Sir, we've got this under control." "No," Creed said firmly. "You don't." Another man stood up from the bleachers. Then another. 4 of them now. The left side of the gym was watching openly. The teacher on stage tried to get everyone's attention back to the ceremony, but it wasn't working. Creed took another step forward. "You're embarrassing yourselves, and you're about to make this worse." Garvin looked at Mally. Both of them were clearly nervous now. "I don't care what your orders are," Creed said. "You don't touch that man. You don't tell him to move. You don't ask again." The gym went quiet. Not from fear, from respect. Solomon finally looked up and gave Creed a small nod. Creed nodded back and sat down, but the tension stayed. In that silence, Solomon's mind drifted back 15 years to Afghanistan. He remembered the heat, the dust, and the sound of gunfire. He had been a gunnery sergeant then. His convoy had been hit by an IED. The lead Humvee flipped. The air filled with smoke and sand. He saw 6 of his men trapped behind the wreckage. One of them was Creed, trying to crawl forward while bleeding badly. Solomon didn't hesitate. He ran through open ground under fire and slid into cover beside him. Together, they dragged another soldier, Soto, towards safety. "Where's Divas?" Solomon shouted. Creed pointed toward the front truck. A young SEAL was trapped under an engine block, leg pinned. Solomon didn't wait. "You move when I move," he told Creed, then ran again. He reached the wreck, crouched low, and grabbed the edge of the crushed hood. It wouldn't move. "Gunny, don't," Divas shouted. "You're not staying here," Solomon said, straining until the metal lifted enough for Divas to pull free. They crawled back under heavy fire. Creed and the others followed. Lim, Horton, Soto. 6 men made it out alive. From that day on, they made a promise. If Solomon ever needed them, they would be there. Back in the gym, Creed sat quietly, staring at the guards still standing near Solomon. He wasn't thinking about war anymore. He was thinking about loyalty. The man who had saved his life was now being harassed for sitting in his son's graduation. Creed clenched his fists. Another SEAL, Javier Meeks, walked in and sat 4 rows back. Then Zachary Wells found a spot on the right side of the bleachers. They didn't speak. They didn't need to. Solomon glanced toward the back and saw Meeks. That look was enough. The guards didn't understand what it meant. Not yet. The ceremony went on. Names were called. Families clapped too loudly. But most people were watching the 3rd row. Garvin looked nervous, but he still didn't back off. A woman at the front, one of the school staff, tried to signal him to stop, but he ignored her. Mally shifted his weight, uncomfortable but still silent. "Sir," Garvin said louder, "this is your last warning." Solomon didn't move. To do what exactly? Garvin leaned closer, his belt brushing Solomon's knee. "To stop making a scene. We don't want trouble. Just move to the back." Solomon looked at him calmly. "You're the only one causing trouble." Garvin's jaw tightened. "You think wearing that uniform makes you better than everyone else? This is a high school, not your base." The words hung in the air like a weight. The gym fell silent. A little girl stopped moving. A father froze with his camera halfway up. Even Mally stepped back. Everyone knew the line had just been crossed. Solomon didn't blink. He took a breath, not to calm himself, but to stay steady. "You need to walk away," he said. Garvin didn't move. His hand dropped to his belt, not on a weapon, but close enough to look like a threat. That's when Creed stood up. He didn't shout or act tough. He just stepped into the aisle, calm and focused, like this was his business now. The gym went quiet. "If you touch him," Creed said clearly, "you'll answer to me." Garvin frowned. "Who the hell are you?" Creed took another step forward. "The man telling you this ends right now." People on the stage started to notice. The staff whispered, calling security, but it was too late. This had already changed the room. More men stood up, scattered through the gym. No one told them to. They just did. All 6 of them, quiet, steady, trained. Garvin looked around, uneasy now. Something about these men felt different. Creed said, "You have 2 choices, walk away, or see this go somewhere you don't want it to." Mally spoke softly. "Let's just back off, man." Garvin hesitated. Solomon said, "Don't waste your breath. He's already made his decision." Creed's voice dropped lower. "Don't mistake silence for weakness." Finally, Garvin stepped back. His hand fell from his belt. His face burned with anger, but he knew he was done. The principal came over, whispered something, and the 2 guards walked away without looking back. Solomon breathed out slowly. Creed sat down again. The others stayed standing. The room stayed tense but calm. Across the gym, Tyron Drayden saw everything. He was in line with his classmates, waiting for his name to be called, but his focus never left his father. He'd seen that look before, calm, firm, unshakable. Then he saw the men stand. He didn't know them, but somehow, he knew they were part of his father's life, soldiers, brothers. Pride filled his chest. He thought about the medals at home, the old flag, the box marked Kandahar. His dad never talked about it, but now Tyron understood. The ceremony went on, but it wasn't the same. People clapped louder, as if they wanted to show respect. Solomon sat still, eyes fixed on the stage. He wasn't angry, just present, just watching. Then the announcer called, "Tyron Drayden." The room erupted. The 6 men clapped together, strong and steady, like a salute. Tyron walked across the stage, proud and calm. He took his diploma, turned, and looked at his father. Solomon didn't wave. He just smiled, small, steady, proud. Tyron nodded once and stepped off the stage, knowing this moment would stay with him forever. The applause didn't stop. Parents who had been quiet the whole ceremony were clapping hard now. Some stood, some wiped their eyes, not sure why, but knowing they had witnessed something special. Solomon sat back and let the moment sink in. He wasn't the kind of man to cry in public, but something inside him loosened. Not pain, not grief, just peace. The kind that comes when a circle finally feels complete. The ceremony went on, names still being called, but something had changed. Every student who walked that stage did so in the echo of what had just happened. Not because it was dramatic, but because it was real. When the ceremony ended and father and son met outside, it wasn't just a proud hug. It was something deeper. 20 minutes later, the last name was called. Caps flew in the air, cheers filled the gym, and balloons bounced above the crowd. Solomon stayed seated for a while, letting it all soak in. He watched Tyron disappear down the hallway with his classmates. Then Tyron turned once, just for a moment, and looked back. Their eyes met. "Did you see me?" Solomon's look said everything, every second. As the crowd thinned, Solomon stood. Creed walked up beside him. "You okay?" Creed asked. "I've been through worse," Solomon said. "Yeah, but it shouldn't have happened," Creed replied. "No," Solomon said quietly. "It shouldn't have." Another SEAL, Javier, joined them. "We tried to stay low, but when that guy reached for his belt." Solomon lifted his hand. "You did what you had to do. That was enough." After a moment, Solomon said, "I want to see my boy." Outside, the sun hit the concrete hard. Students were everywhere, taking pictures, laughing, calling to family. Tyron stood near the flagpole, gown half open, diploma in hand. When he saw his father, he stopped talking and walked over. "You okay?" he asked. "Yeah," Solomon said. "You?" Tyron nodded. "They tried to move you." "I know. I was 2 seconds from walking off that stage." Solomon placed a hand on his shoulder. "And that's why you didn't." Tyron frowned. "What do you mean?" "Because you knew I could handle it," Solomon said. "And because you handled your moment like a man. You didn't let anyone take it from you." Tyron glanced behind him at the seals near the door. Who were those guys? Men I served with, Solomon said. Men who know loyalty. Men who don't forget. That was powerful, Tyron said. It was necessary, Solomon replied. Sometimes silence is louder than shouting. Sometimes standing without words says everything. They stood quietly for a while. Then Tyron smiled. You gonna tell me those were stories now? Solomon chuckled. Some of them. You're old enough for the real parts now. Across the lot, Creed raised a hand. A simple gesture of respect. Tyron returned it. The sun kept rising, but for them, time moved slower now. By the time they reached the parking lot, most people were gone. Solomon unlocked the Charger, the same car his wife used to drive. She would have been screaming the loudest today, Tyron said softly. Solomon smiled. And she would have made you retake every photo till your smile looked right. They got in. The car was warm, quiet, almost peaceful. After a moment, Tyron asked, why didn't you say anything to those guards? You just sat there. Solomon tapped the steering wheel. Because I don't have to stand up for who I am. And I don't need to raise my voice to be heard. Tyron looked out the window. Solomon went on. What those men did wasn't new. But how we respond, that's what defines us. They disrespected you, Tyron said. Yes, Solomon replied. But everyone saw what really happened. They saw 6 men stand up, not because I asked them to, but because they knew what that moment meant. Son, Solomon said softly, life will give you 100 chances to react with anger. Sometimes anger's right. But most times, silence cuts deeper. Dignity lasts longer. That's what people remember. He pulled out a folded photo, Tyron as a baby, in his late wife's arms. I carried this through Kandahar, through losing your mom, and through today. Not for strength, but to remind me what's worth protecting. Tyron's voice lowered. You always knew who had your back. I didn't need to know, Solomon said. I just had faith. Real men don't run when things get hard. They show up. I want to be like that, Tyron said. You already are, Solomon replied. You walked that stage with pride. You stayed calm when the world tried to shake you. Outside, the seals were leaving. Creed looked once towards Solomon's car. No words, just respect. So what now? Tyron asked. Now we drive home, Solomon said. You pick dinner. Tyron grinned. Waffle House. Solomon laughed. Of course. They drove off. The school faded behind them. But what happened that day would stay with them forever. For Tyron, it was more than graduation. It was the day he learned that being a man isn't about noise. It's about how you carry yourself when no one's watching. Some people shout to be seen. Others stay silent and are never forgotten. If this story moved you, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.